All right, here we are. We're going to talk about the second section in the prerequisite chapter here for PreCalc. And we start off by just talking about the Cartesian coordinate system. All right, this is a coordinate plane. This is an XY chart. It does give us quite a bit of information. There's a lot of vocab going into it. The ability to graph on the plane and to know what's going on. So if you want to be an engineer, that's okay. You definitely have to know at least that. If you want to do some 3D printing, some of the access programs for that have you deal with coordinate plane, and they add in the third dimension as well. So a couple things you want to make sure that you know some vocabulary on page 12. So origin, axis, coordinates, ordered pair, etc. Make sure you know all those things. You probably didn't use them as much in geometry, so think back to Algebra 2, but also in Algebra 1. The quadrants, as you know, are 1, 2, 3, 4. They're counterclockwise, as you can see here. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Again, you can access any of that stuff on page 12. I keep saying that, but remember, I'm starting to populate everything that you have. So if you come back here, you can see that in chapter P, you now have the access to that section of the textbook as well. So I'm not going to put the whole thing in there all at once. It takes a little while, but I'm going to get those in there as you need them this year. All right, so we'll close up my library here. Plotting the points, right? That's something that I feel pretty confident you guys are good with. So we're going to practice those. Also, point number 1, what is this point? So we can do those. All right, the absolute value, remember that is the distance from 0. The distance that lies from 0 on the number line, that is the absolute value. Usually in Algebra 1, kids will say, well, that means it's always positive. Yeah, well, the answer isn't always positive. As you can see in number 2, that we are going to get -7 out of here. We can take the absolute value of -7 and get 7, and now it becomes -28. So we just want to make sure you remember, as your order of operations, it works like parentheses, but we're going to have to deal with changing those to the distance from 0. We know this is the absolute value of -23, so the answer is 23 as we simplify those. All right, distance on the number line between A and B, so the order doesn't matter because we're going to take the absolute value of that distance. We do have the distance formula, so this is one place where you might feel pretty comfortable because you had some geometry and you worked with those. The order doesn't matter, just like slope, as long as you are consistent, just like the slope. So if we take a look here, we tie together the x's. So if we're doing x minus x, we get 3 minus 6, so that's -3. We're going to end up squaring it, and that's why it doesn't matter which way we do the whole thing. So normally I'll grab just the points and kind of work with those before we do anything else. So I'll just shut up and write just a little bit here. So we know this is -7 squared. Just don't forget, as you can see, I'm not writing the square root on each one, but in the end, we do want to make sure we write it as the square root of 58. And so that would give us our distance between those two. So what is that about? Well, just think that 49 is pretty close, so 7. And it's not up to 64 yet, which would be 8. So somewhere between 7 and 8 will get us our distance. The other thing you probably work with in geometry is the midpoint. When I talk about midpoint, I always think about average or finding the mean if you came from a stats class. So if I just want to find the average between these 2 points, right, that means I want the 2 points, the x values, and I divide it by 2. So if you ever get mixed up with those, it's also the only time we use something that looks like the slope equation, but we use addition. Everywhere else we're subtracting, just like distance formula up here, we're going to subtract these things. So I think we have one down here. So I want to find the average. So we're going to add those up. So it would technically look like 6 plus -2 divided by 2. And since it is a midpoint, my answer should look like a point. So this is going to get me to 4. So I get 2. Here you get -7 plus -15. It's over 2. Again, I'm putting a comma in. So that's -22, so -11. So the midpoint between there is 2, -11. Okay. And we could always go ahead and draw this out on the coordinate plane. So you can kind of double check those. Equation of a circle. Okay, so this is kind of a big one from Algebra 2. And I think you do use this quite a bit in geometry as well. We're going to stick to things that are in standard form, which means the center is h and k. Okay, so we do have hk is the center here. Notice the equation is minus on both of those, just as a quick reminder, and it is equal to the radius squared. So we have a couple different ways to work with this. Can you write the equation for A here? And then can we pull the information out for B? These are a little bit jammed together, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. This means that I have x minus -5, so I'll make it x plus 5. The whole thing is squared, plus, instead of saying y minus 0, I'm going to go with y squared, and it equals 36, because that was the radius squared. So that's how we deal with A. If you write y minus 0, it's not technically wrong. That's perfectly okay. That's what the k value is, but we just try not to list those things in there that aren't needed. So here the center is going to be located at 7 paired with -4, and the radius, remember this was squared, so we're going to be at the square root of 41. Whether we work with decimals or simplified radicals, we'll delineate that. I want to make sure we have the idea of circles first before we start getting into any intricate details. Okay, so that's our circles. Verifying right triangles, Pythagorean theorem. Oh, your old friend, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So we're going to use that. So if I give you these 3 points, I tried to work ahead, so you might have to pause. If you want to draw a picture, it's totally up to you. But the big idea is we're going to use the distance formula. So eventually we can say is a squared, so pick one of the legs, a, b, c is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So we can work out all 3 of those to see if it's going to work. So that's how we use that to verify our right triangles. All right, and I think that's it for this assignment. If you feel pretty comfortable with those, if you want to work ahead, I do have some numbers listed here. Okay, otherwise we'll start those after our pair deck in class.